Tracy presenta el programa Fénix. La psicología del logro.
Session 9. Programming your mind for success.
Everything you are or ever will be is a result of what is going on inside your mind. This is the most awesome concept that I've ever discovered, that anybody has ever discovered. That you can dramatically change the outer realities of your life by changing your inner attitudes of mind, as William James said. We talked earlier about the various laws, the law of belief, that your beliefs do become your realities, that you actually see the world in terms of what you believe to be true about it. Beliefs create the actual facts. As a man thinketh in his heart, or as a woman thinketh in her heart, so are they. We also know that law of correspondence says that your outer world will always correspond with your inner world. That means that there is something in your inner world that corresponds to everything in your outer world. The great Emmett Fox said this when he talked about the mental equivalent. He said that everything in your outer life has a mental equivalent in your inner life. Anything that you want to see different in your outer life, you must first provide the mental equivalent internally. And the law of attraction says that anything that you keep holding your mind on a continuing basis, you draw to you. That your dominant thoughts set up a force field of energy that draws into your life the people and circumstances that you need. I mention that because of this. Many people say, well, how will I get a better job or a better relationship? How will I find the information I need or get the education and so on? You don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is get it crystal clear in your mind, and you trigger into and get into the flow of these universal mental laws, and everything that you need will be brought to you exactly as you need it, exactly when you need it, and exactly in the form that you need it. Now, we're going to talk in this session. We talked about self-concept before. We said that your self-concept is that bundle of beliefs inside that determines everything that happens to you. Your self-concept is the sum total result of every single piece of information that you've ever taken in about yourself or your world, accepted as true. It becomes part of your self-concept, and your self-concept is the corresponding inner mechanism that determines what happens to you. What does this mean? It means that all change begins with a change in the self-concept. All change begins by you taking in new information that changes your beliefs. Now, beliefs are the hardest of all things to change because we defend them so vigorously. We have to be willing to give up some of our self-limiting beliefs. We have to be willing to look at our beliefs honestly. Remember, we talked about self-knowledge. You have to be willing to look at our beliefs honestly and say, do these beliefs serve me? Is this what I want to be? Is this what I want to do? Is this the best that I can have? And you begin to question your beliefs and change your self-concept by taking in new information that develops a new self-concept. And that brings us to a concept called the psychology of becoming. The psychology of becoming says that each one of us is in a continuous state of growth and change. That your self-concepts and your beliefs are changing all the time. For instance, when you were a child, you believed one set of things about the adult world. When you were a teenager, another. When you were in your early 20s, you believed another. And as we grow and evolve, we change our beliefs and our self-concept. We change our self-image. We change the way we see the world. So we're in this process of becoming all the time. It's going on. It's almost like this. It's like a tumbleweed. Is that you are evolving and changing and growing all the time, but always in the direction of your dominant goals. Always in the direction of what you are thinking about the most intensely at the time. For instance, an alcoholic or a drug addict is also evolving and changing in the direction of his or her dominant goals, because that's what they think about all the time. And if you want to evolve and grow rapidly, you have to make those goals clear, you have to make them sharp, you have to make them intense, and you have to dwell on them all the time. Sometimes you see people who are very successful at an early age, but you'll find that those people had an obsession, a total preoccupation with a particular area or field for a long time, whereas other people who may be much older have never had an intense feeling or have never dwelled on anything they want to accomplish. Now, there's two obstacles to this psychology of becoming. Number one is called homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is the desire for consistency. It is a natural desire within the human mind to stay constant with what has happened in the past. If you like, we like to maintain the status quo. These are the people who say that's the way we've always done it, this is the way we do it around here, etc., etc. You must watch out for homeostasis, because what it does is it causes your thinking to become rigid and inflexible. And the other is called psychosclerosis. Psychosclerosis is simply a hardening of the attitudes. A hardening of the attitudes. People with psychosclerosis develop what is called fixed ideas. Fixed ideas lead to rigidity and an unwillingness to change. Both of these lead to getting stuck in the comfort zone. Remember, the natural tendency of all human behavior is for you to start doing something in a certain way and then get stuck in a comfort zone. You get stuck in a comfort zone in a relationship, even if you're not happy, in a job, even if you're not satisfied, with a particular level of income, even if it's not enough. You have to fight the comfort zone, because the comfort zone very soon becomes a rut. And they say that a rut becomes a grave. And the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. Or another way that it's been put is that a grave is simply a rut, or a rut is simply a grave with the ends kicked out. So be very alert to that, because the great majority of people in our society tend and evolve naturally to get into a comfort zone, to become very rigid defenders of the status quo, to become very hardened in their attitudes. They get into this comfort zone, they fall into this rut, and even if it would be good for them, they don't change. Now, this leads us to the two great powers that control everything that happens to you. And the first power is the power of love. The power of love is the power that shapes your personality and shapes your destiny. The power of love simply says that everything that we do is either to get love or to compensate for the lack of love. We said earlier that children's entire personality is formed by the quality and quantity of love that they get, and that all adult problems are as the result of love withheld. Love withheld from our parents, and perhaps love withheld from people when we grow up. The other power is the power of suggestion. Now, the power of suggestion works on us all of our lives. The power of suggestion is extremely strong. What it does is it begins working on us almost from the time that we're born, sometimes from before birth, and the power of suggestion shapes us. It means that every single thought you think, everything you hear, everything that you see, touch, taste, or smell, everything that affects you in any way has an effect on your personality. We say it this way. We say everything counts. Everything counts, and especially when you become an adult, remember that everything counts. Now, the average adult in America watches 20 to 25 hours of television every week. The average senior citizen watches about 7 hours of television. Average child watches 3 or 4 hours of television per day. Do you know that the average chief executive officer of major American corporations watches less than 5 hours per week? Now, let me ask you a very simple question. Do you think there's a correlation between the number of hours that a person watches television and how successful they are in life? Do you think that the suggestive influences, books, magazines, tapes, courses, seminars, people, television programs, and so on, that you watch, listen to, read, associate with on an ongoing basis, do you think these suggestive influences are having any effect on your future? Let me just put it this way. Everything does count. And you have to ask yourself this question. I learned this many years ago. Is ask yourself this question: what is it that you want in life? Once you've asked yourself what it is you want in life, then you can look around your world and you can determine what is right for you and what is wrong for you. What does that mean? It means that everything that moves you toward what you want is right, and everything that moves you away from what you want is wrong, but everything counts. Well, I have a good friend who goes on a diet on a regular basis. And every so often, I catch him eating cheesecake. And sometimes he's eating 2 pieces of cheesecake with lunch. And I say to him, I said, I thought you were on a diet. I said, I thought you only eat fresh fruits and vegetables and natural foods. And he says, sure. He said, well, I said, what about the cheesecake? He said, well, I don't count that. Do you know how many people sit at home and watch television 3 or 4 hours a night, who want to be successful, who read the comic strips and the sports pages, who read junky magazines or nothing at all, listen to the radio, don't do anything with their time or their minds? And they say, but I want to be successful. I want to be more successful. I said, well, what about all these things that you're doing to waste your time? They say, well, I don't count that. But unfortunately, nature counts everything. So this brings us to some laws that I want to share with you. The first law is the law of habit. Now, these are also mental laws. The law of habit is very similar to the law of inertia. The law of inertia says that a body at rest tends to remain at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. It also says that a body in motion tends to remain in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. The law of habit says that in the absence of a specific decision on your part to change some aspect of your life, the natural tendency will be to go on the same way indefinitely. As a time management specialist once said, the more you do of what you're doing, the more you get of what you've got. So you have to look at what you've got and look at what you're doing and say, is this what you want? You will go on indefinitely in the same direction unless you make a very concrete, specific decision to change. Also, there's another law. It's called the law of emotion. And by the way, before I get into the law of emotion, let me say this. That about 95% of everything that we do is by habit. That the only major difference between successful people and failures is that successful people have success habits and failures have failure habits. For example, you've heard the old saying, early to bed and early to rise? They say, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Well, why is that? Why is it that so many successful people get up early in the morning? It's because they get a jump on the day. It's also because it forces them to go to bed earlier at night so they don't waste the evenings when they're the tiredest and least productive. So you find that over and over again, successful men and women are early to bed and early to rise. They have a success habit. Why is it that people don't go to bed early or don't get up early? Because they're too lazy, they're too undisciplined, they don't have goals that they want badly enough, they do not have success habits. 95% of your success is going to be determined by the type of habits you develop. And if you have good habits, you're going to be successful in spite of anything else. The law of emotion says simply this. It says that every decision that you make is based on emotion. Is that we used to say over and over again that people are 90% emotional and 10% logical. Well, one of the great discoveries that I've made in the course of my research is the discovery that we are 100% emotional. That we're not even 99% emotional. Every single decision we make is an emotional decision. If somebody says, well, it's the logical thing to do, what it simply means is they have more emotion invested in that, even though it sounds logical. The law of emotion says that every decision that we make is emotional, and it says this. It says that stronger emotion will dominate a weaker emotion. Stronger emotion dominates a weaker emotion. So whichever emotion is stronger will be the dominant emotion and will determine what you do. All action is determined by the emotion that is predominant at the time. And with whatever is the stronger emotion, if it is fear, fear will determine what you do. If it is desire, desire will determine what you do. The two major emotions that wrestle within us all the time are fear versus desire. World Championship goes on over and over again. Your fears that hold you back, your desires that propel you forward. Now, how do you turn this equation so that your desires win? It's very simple. You use the law of concentration. And you think about what you want all the time. You dwell on what you want all the time. You keep your mind fixed on your desires. You become totally preoccupied with what you want. And as we said before, your fears have a tendency to dwindle. But whichever thing you think about, if you think about your fears or you think about your desires, whichever one you think about, by the law of emotion is going to determine your actions, and your actions will determine your outcomes. This brings us to another law, which is called the law of expression. And this law of expression is very interesting. This law of expression goes back many, many years, and it predates even a quote from Aristotle, which says, whatever is impressed is expressed. Whatever is impressed is expressed. Whatever is impressed is expressed. Now, what does this mean? Let me go and sit down while we get the board cleaned off. It means simply this, is that whatever is impressed into your psyche for any reason, and from whatever source, whatever is mixed with emotion and dropped into your self-concept will eventually be expressed as part of your personality, part of your reality. It says, in effect, that you see the world through your self-concept. You actually see your concept of the world. You do not believe what you see what you believe. Whatever has been impressed on your mind as a fact, or as a truth, or as a reality, will then be expressed in your reality or expressed in your world, because that is what you will see. If you believe that a certain type of people are good, then you will see goodness in those people. If you believe that members of a particular political party are fools, then all members of that political party will appear foolish to you, even the wisest and most intelligent. If you believe that there is opportunity everywhere, you will see opportunity everywhere. If you believe that you're in complete control of your own destiny, then you will see indications of that. If you believe that you are a popular, courageous, confident, influential person, then you will act in a manner consistent with it, and you will see it all around you. I was reading a very interesting story not long ago about a young man who came from poor beginnings and had no self-confidence at all, but was convinced by a fortune teller that he was the reincarnation of Napoleon Bonaparte. Wonderful story, true story too. And he began to believe that he was the reincarnation of Napoleon Bonaparte. And he went to the library and he studied Napoleon. He read all about Napoleon, and he began to walk and talk and act like Napoleon. He began to think like Napoleon. He began to imagine great plans like Napoleon would have imagined. He began to act with courage and confidence in the face of uncertainty, as Napoleon would have. Over time, he became absolutely convinced that indeed this person who was shy and retiring was truly the reincarnation of Napoleon. And as he did, his career improved. He was promoted. He was advanced. He changed the way he dressed. He spoke more confidently. And by the time he found out that he had been misled by the fortune teller, he was already an extremely successful businessman. Very interesting. Whatever is impressed and accepted becomes expressed. And this brings us to another critical mental law. And it is this. It is what is called the law of reversibility. When I first learned about this law, I was so excited I wanted to wrap it up and tie it up and not tell anybody. This is the first time in any form that I've ever explained this law to other people. The law of reversibility says simply this, is that if you achieve a certain level of success, a certain level of health, a certain quality of relationships, then that quality of relationships will create a subjective state. A subjective state means a feeling or an emotional state. In other words, if you win a prize, you will feel like a winner. If you fall in love, you'll feel like a lover. If you succeed in business, you'll feel like a success. The objective creates, in other words, the objective reality or the fact actually creates the subjective or the emotional state. That makes sense to you? In other words, something happens, you feel great, you get the feeling. However, the law of reversibility says this. If you can grasp this, this one fact alone can change your life, because it has changed mine. Is that if you can create artificially the subjective state, the feeling will trigger the law of attraction and correspondence into motion, and will draw into your life the people, circumstances, and opportunities necessary to create the objective that is constant with the subjective. And here is the method. It's so simple, it's astonishing. It is this, is whenever you think of something that you really desire, imagine that you have it already. Imagine that you have it already. It sounds like a game, like children would play. But it is so powerful that it is awe-inspiring, and all I suggest you do is try it for a little while. Just imagine, close your eyes, driving along, think about it if necessary, stand, relax, do whatever you want, but just imagine that you've already accomplished it, and try to get the feeling. Get the feeling. As though it were already a success, as though it were a past tense, as though it were already accomplished, that you don't have to worry about it again. You've already got the feeling. And if you will play that feeling over and over again, this law of reversibility will create this feeling. As you dwell upon the feeling more and more, the feeling will actually begin to change things inside you and outside of you, and draw you toward your goal and draw your goal toward you, and the objective will come into reality exactly at the right time and place. You don't even really have to worry about the process between the two or what the steps are. All you have to do is hold that feeling very, very intensely. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about mental programming methods. Now, the next law is the law of practice. The law of practice is also called the law of repetition, but it says that whatever you do over and over again, often enough, becomes a new habit. Do you want to be a positive, exciting, enthusiastic person? Do you want to become wealthy and successful? What is it that you want in life? Whatever you want in life, if you will practice it over and over again, it eventually becomes a new habit. If you practice it by thinking about it, you see, a new habit takes about 21 days to develop. It takes about 21 days to develop a new habit. 21 days of repeating it over and over again. Now, what we're going to ask you to do as a result of this course and as a result of what we've talked about is we're going to ask you or suggest that you go on what we call a 21-day PMA diet. That means that for 21 days, we're going to ask you to do a very difficult thing. One of the most difficult things you'll ever do in your life is for 21 days, we want you to keep your mind on what you want and keep it off of what you don't want. Keep your conversation on what you want. Keep your conversation off of what you don't want. Keep your dreams, your imagination, your thoughts, your feelings, everything in your environment consistent with what you desire, and keep it off of what you don't want. It's very simple. It's not very complicated. It's one of the most difficult things that you'll ever do. Now, why do we pick 21 days? Well, a very good reason. You see, it takes 21 days for a chicken that has a brain the size of a pea to sit patiently, calmly, faithfully on an egg to hatch the egg. Now, we feel that if a chicken with a little brain like that can sit on an egg for 21 days without seeing any change, just in faith, for 21 days it can sit there on that egg, then we could probably ask adults who have brains that are the size of 3 pounds, that have 12 to 20 billion cells, and have the capacity to remember and retain all the knowledge known to man, if their brain could be tapped, we ask them to keep at it for 21 days. If you will go on a positive mental attitude diet for 21 days, keep your mind on it, the goal is to become what we call a purely positive person. A purely positive person. Because we know that if you're a purely positive person, if your conversations, your acts, and your relationships are purely positive, what we call a PPP person, and you practice that for 21 days, you will find that your life will change. That everything around you will change. Your health, your relationships, your work, your opportunities, and everything else. It's simple, but it's not easy. If you can do it, if you can practice it, it will become a new habit. The very law of reversibility, the very law of emotion, the very law of habit that we talked about will actually begin to be changed. Now, what are the 4 things you need in order to make this great change? Number 1 is you need desire. Desire is the starting point of all change. The most important question that you have to ask yourself in life is, how badly do you want what you want? How badly do you want it? Or do you want it at all? You see, there's an awful lot of people who want an awful lot of things. But how badly do they want it? If you want it so badly, if you want it with tremendous intensity of desire, there's really nothing in the world that can stop you from getting it. There's an interesting story was told about Socrates, and Socrates was talking to one of his students, and the student said, "I am hungry for knowledge. What can I do to increase my knowledge?" And Socrates said, knowledge is something that is readily available and easy to get if you want it bad enough. He said, I'm sure I want it badly enough. And Socrates said, "Come with me." And he walked him offshore into the ocean, and walked him offshore into the Aegean Sea. And they got about 3 or 4 feet, and Socrates, a very, very strong man, grabbed the young man and put his head under the water. And the young man began to struggle and struggle and struggle, and finally became incredibly frantic, and finally brought him up. And he said, "Now, what did you want while you were under the water?" And he said, "All I wanted was air." He said, "All I could think of in the whole world was air." He said, "When you want knowledge with the same intensity that you wanted that oxygen, you will get all the knowledge that you could desire. And when you want anything with great intensity, if you have the desire, you'll get it." Now, the second step is decision. Over and over again, where I travel, I find that the major change in a person's life begins when they make a decision. I also find that the great majority of people are incredibly indecisive, is that they're very reluctant to make decisions to cut off their options. They are very, very reluctant to make a commitment of any kind. And in not making a commitment, they just drift. They unfortunately condemn themselves to living by the law of accident. So the next step is to make a decision, a very clear, unequivocal decision, is that this is what you want and you are willing to pay the price to get it. There's a very interesting little book called The Ultimate Secret by Michael Hernacki, and he said that the key to success, after he's studied many, many successful people, says the key to success is simply this, is be willing to do whatever is necessary. Be willing to do whatever is necessary. Be willing to do whatever is necessary. That means once you've made the decision, be willing to go the extra mile. Be willing to do whatever is necessary. And the interesting thing is that you won't ever have to do everything that's necessary, but you must be willing to do it. And it's that unequivocal decision, that do or die, that complete, total, 100% commitment that makes all the difference in your success. Most people are unwilling to make the commitment. And if they do make the commitment, they hold themselves back. They say, I want it, but I'm not willing to do this, or I won't do that, or I won't move, I won't go back to school, I can't sacrifice this, and so on. I've spoken to many parents, for instance, who have undergone great sacrifices so that the mother can stay home with the young children during their first 3 to 5 years. And people say, well, you're crazy, you need the money, you can't take trips, you don't have enough money to pay bills when you're not one of two people working. They say yes, but our decision is to give our children the finest grounding and the finest emotional basis possible. And we feel that the way to do it is for the mother to be home with the children. So they are willing to make the sacrifices. And of course, everybody has to make their decisions with regard to what sacrifices they want to make. The third is determination. Determination means to back your plan with, if you like, iron willpower. Again, every single study that I've looked at, and I've spent, in the course of my lifetime, I've spent almost 30,000 hours studying the subject of personal and corporate success, is that iron willpower is absolutely critical. Determination, the willingness to stick in when the going gets tough, the willingness to persist in the face of adversity. That kind of determination is absolutely critical to developing the new habit patterns of thought that will guarantee your success. And finally, discipline. This is my big favorite. It's usually the only place in this course where I mention this, but discipline is the master key to riches. Discipline is the master key to riches. Discipline, the willingness to do what you know you should do, when you should do it, whether you like it or not, is the critical key to your success. Why is it that people fail in life? It's no miracle. It's no mystery. The reason people fail in life is that they're not willing to do whatever is necessary. They're not willing to pay the price. Half the time, three-quarters of the time, they don't know what they want, and the ones that do know what they want are not capable of disciplining themselves. So the next time you sit there watching the television, next time you drive along listening to the radio instead of listening to an audio cassette program, you have to ask yourself quite honestly, in terms of the wonderful life that you are capable of enjoying, in terms of all the things that you want, is this moving you toward it, or is it moving you away from it? Because the truth of the matter is that everything that does not move you towards your goal moves you away from your goal. That nothing is neutral, that everything counts, that the sands of time are running, the clock, the meter is going right now. A very good friend of mine said, remember, this life is not a rehearsal for anything else. This is the real one. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you serious about being and having and doing everything that's possible for you? If you're going a 21-day mental attitude diet, a PMA diet, if you will keep your thoughts on what you want for 21 days, if you will practice the law and develop new habits, practice repetition over and over again, practice the law of reversibility, and visualize and imagine yourself as the person you want to be, and practice the law of expression, that whatever is impressed on your mind will be expressed in your reality, you will see dramatic changes start to take place in your life, and sometimes far faster than you can currently imagine. Believe me, I know I have tried and practiced everything that I recommend to you. Thousands of my graduates have done it, and the results they have accomplished have been stupendous. They will be stupendous for you, too, and we'll talk about more of that in the next module.
Session 10, Changing Your Self-Concept.
To repeat, All change in your life begins with a change in your self-concept. And that brings us back to what we talked about when we talked about the three ingredients of self-concept at the very beginning. We said that there were three parts: the self-ideal, the self-image, and the self-esteem, or how much you like yourself. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to talk a little bit about what we call the self-ideal. Because the self-ideal is the person that you would most like to be. When you start thinking about changing your personality, improving the quality of your life, your inner and your outer life, you have to start off with a target. You have to start off with something to shoot for, something to aim at. So let's talk about this. The self-ideal is a fundamental part of your personality. The self-ideal is a combination of all of the qualities of men and women that you have read about, studied about, associated with, or admired throughout your entire life. Your self-ideal is sort of like a role model for you, an internal role model. And this internal role model acts as a directional mechanism within your psyche that determines your words, actions, thoughts, behaviors, and so on. As a matter of fact, you are today, in many respects, the sum total composite of all the different men and women whose qualities and characteristics that you ever admired. If you read a biography, an autobiography, a story about a person who has done something that you think is admirable, displayed qualities of intelligence or character or compassion or perseverance or persistence or courage and so on, if someone has done those things and you have a tendency to admire them, if you admire them, what happens is you have a tendency unconsciously, even without your knowing it, to try to be more like them. Now, there is a difference between the self-image, which is where you see yourself now, and your self-esteem, which is how much you like yourself. And there's a difference between your self-image and your self-ideal. The distance between these two, the way you see yourself now and the way you would ideally like to be, has a major impact on your self-esteem. People who see themselves working progressively toward becoming more and more like the people they want to be have high self-esteem. People who see themselves as having an enormous, almost unbridgeable distance between the person they see themselves as now and the person they know they should or could be usually have low self-esteem. So the starting point of change in the self-concept, to repeat, comes with defining clearly what it is you want to look like. Now, when I was about 17, 18 years old, I sat down with a notebook and I wrote out a description of the person that I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote several pages. I described my personality and my height and my weight and how I would get along with people and so on. And many years later, 10, 15, 20 years later, after I had traveled around the world twice, after I'd been in 80 countries, after I had done a great variety of things, I came across those notes in an old suitcase. And I looked and I read them. And you know, the surprising thing was that I had become, over the course of that time, the person that I had described in that notebook. So I suggest to you this, is you start off by saying, who is it and what is it that you would like to look like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now? Or let's put it this way, and here's a really good question. Name 3 men or women, living or dead, that you really admire, that you really feel are wonderful, fine, upstanding role models. And then ask yourself the question, why is it that you admire them? Why is it that you like them? What is it about them? What are their qualities, if you like, that you consider outstanding? Because those are the qualities, if you can identify them, that you'll begin moving toward accomplishing in your own life. Remember, we said that desire, discipline, determination, and decision are the keys to success, but also definition. You have to define clearly what you want to be. I remember a wonderful story of a young fellow who decided he wanted to improve his life, and he was working for an insurance company. And he sat and looked around him, and he was number 28 or 29 out of 30 people in an insurance company selling insurance, and he'd been there for several years, and his career was going nowhere. And he began looking about him, looking at this, and he said, now, who do I admire? Who would I like to be like? Who would my ideal be? And he decided he wanted to be like the top salesman in the branch. And he started to look at the top salesmen and the top 1 or 2 salespeople in the branch, and he started to think about them and think about what they did. And he began to talk to them and get advice from them. And over the course of the next few years, by using this process, by patterning himself after the people he admired, he became more and more like them. He dressed like them. He walked like them. He talked like them. He worked the way they did. He studied the way they did. And in time, he became not only the top salesman in the branch, the top salesman in the region, the top salesman in the division, eventually the top salesman in the country, and he became a marketing vice president for one of the biggest insurance companies in the nation, simply by establishing a self-ideal and then working progressively toward it. Well, what are the stages? The first starting stage, as we say, of changing the self-concept, of changing your mind, becoming a new or a different person, is that the change must be perceived by you as being both desirable and necessary. In other words, you must see that if you were to make this change, it would be a worthwhile change, and in terms of what you want to be, have, and do, in terms of the future of your life, it's necessary that you make this change if you want to get ahead. I'll give you another example of a famous gentleman from a Fortune 500 corporation, was promoted to president, came up through engineering, left brain, had no people skills at all, was very, very concerned about this part of his personality in that he didn't know how to get along with people. He preferred problems that didn't talk back. But he recognized that a change in his self-concept, a change in his ability to communicate effectively with others was essential to his success. So he began taking courses on interpersonal communications. He began taking courses on relationships. For 2 solid years, he read books, listened to tapes, took courses, and became an authority within the company on human relations, and then put together a course of his own and went throughout the company as the president of the company and taught this course within his company, becoming the things that he was teaching. In other words, he decided that to be very good with people was both desirable and necessary for himself, his company, and his future. And then he went about through the process of gradual defining the ideal and began working progressively toward it. In 2 years, he had rounded out his personality from being a lopsided, left-brain, linear, analytical person to being a totally rounded, fully functioning human being. One of the hallmarks of great leaders, one of the hallmarks of outstanding men and women, is that they're willing to make the efforts necessary to bring about the changes that are essential. Now, the second stage, or the second step in changing your self-concept, is to begin thinking about yourself as you would ideally be. Begin thinking about yourself as your ideal person. For instance, if you wanted to be an outstanding person in human relations, you'd begin thinking about yourself as you would be as a human relations specialist. But let us say you want something very simple. Most people say that their major weakness is that they are too impatient, too intolerant, they get angry too quickly, irritable, so on. Maybe what you should do is start with something very simple. Very important to start with something simple, because if you can change something simple, it proves to you that you can change something large. So you begin thinking about yourself. Let us say that you tend to be a little bit impatient or short-tempered when you're tired, or you're a little bit irritable with your children or your spouse at the end of the day. So then you begin thinking about yourself as you would be if you were a warm, patient, kind, loving, tolerant human being. Begin thinking about yourself in the situations where you normally become cross and irritable, and begin thinking about yourself as being relaxed, positive, supportive, encouraging, unruffled. Begin thinking about yourself as the ideal. Think now, who do you know who has the type of personality? Now, it can be a television personality. It can be Bill Cosby, if you like. It can be somebody that you admire in sports. It can be somebody whose biographies or stories you've read. It doesn't really matter, but keep thinking about how would that person act in this situation. One thing that many people do, many Christians do, is whenever they get into a difficult or stressful situation, they say to themselves, I wonder how Jesus would act in this situation. I wonder how Jesus would act if they were dealing with a difficult person. Or I wonder how Jesus would act if he were put in the same position I'm in. And what it does is, irrespective of your belief, what it does is it gives you a role model to pattern yourself after. The great tragedy of many young people growing up in the inner cities today is that the role models that they have are not positive role models. The people who are the most successful sometimes in the ghettos in the inner cities are not admirable people who are working hard and building families and businesses. What they are is they're criminals who are engaging in criminal activities. So the role models that you choose have a critical effect on who you become. So begin thinking about yourself as you would like to be. As you would like to be. Now that's starting point. Because of the law of expression, whatever is impressed is expressed. If you begin thinking about yourself, you begin finding it's almost like turning the wheel of your personality. You begin to become a different person. Now, the third step is you begin to visualize. Now, what does visualize mean? Well, there are thousands of books written on visualization. One of the most powerful of all human abilities is the ability to create clear mental pictures. You see, your subconscious, which is where all of your programming takes place, is activated by mental pictures combined with emotion. So when you create clear mental pictures, when you begin to dwell on a clear mental picture of the person that you would like to be, you begin to close your eyes or think about the person that you would like to be, the subconscious cannot tell the difference between a real experience, one that is actually happening to you, and one that you vividly imagine on the screen of your mind. And this method of visualization, of creating a clear mental picture, and then remember we talked about the law of practice, which is the law of repetition. By practicing it over and over and over again. Imagine, for instance, that you wanted to become a proficient public speaker. Simple as that. And let us say this is you, and this is your eyes, and here is your conscious mind, and here is your unconscious mind. Let us say you wanted to become a proficient public speaker. Well, if you went out and you gave a whole series of talks, and you got positive response, and people applauded and told you that it was a good talk, and you did this over and over again, no matter how terrified you are of public speaking right now, if you did it often enough, gradually you would store up enough memories to the point where you would feel no uneasiness at all about speaking publicly. Now, the reason I mention speaking publicly is that something like 54% of the American public would rather die than give a talk in public. They put the fear of public speaking ahead of the fear of death. It's one of the greatest of all fears in our society. However, no child is born as afraid of public speaking. No child comes into the world with a fear of speaking in front of audiences. As a matter of fact, every one of us gave our first public talk stark naked, upside down, in front of a room full of strangers, if you remember that, and it's been downhill for most of us ever since. If you have a series of external experiences, however, and all of those experiences are positive, then they're stored away as positive reports in the public speaking file. However, let us say that you have a tremendous feeling of anxiety about speaking, and that can come from 100 different reasons, but you begin to play on the screen of your mind. You have this continuous real projector. You begin to play on the screen of your mind a picture of yourself speaking effectively in front of a group. You begin to read about other people who speak effectively. You begin to read the books of successful speakers who tell how they did it and how nervous they were. You begin to take a course and you begin to study and you begin to learn how to do it. You begin to learn how to prepare and to outline a talk. And you begin thinking about yourself over and over again as capable of doing it. The picture that you play on the screen of your mind is accepted by the subconscious as a real experience as long as you vividly imagine it. And this is the key. It is the vividness of the picture. The more clearly you visualize it, the more frequently you visualize it, the more emotionally or intensely you visualize it, and the longer you visualize it, the more of an impact it has on the subconscious mind, so that you can, in many respects, actually become halfway or three-quarters of the way toward being a competent speaker or being competent in almost anything simply by visualizing and playing this picture over and over again. By the way, I use the example of speaking in public for a very specific reason. Most of us are afraid of it. And what I have found is that if you can use these methods of mental programming to eliminate one major fear that may be holding you back in life, you will prove to yourself forever that you can eliminate any self-limiting belief and overcome it and go on to accomplish what you want. I have given this advice to thousands of people. It's simply this. If you have an uneasiness with regard to public speaking or any other fear, but public speaking for this example, make the decision right now to get over it. Now, here's two ways that you can get over it. Toastmasters. Does this method work? Well, I'll guarantee you that it works. Toastmasters was set up in 1923 as an organization, a voluntary organization. Groups of men and women come together, small groups. They meet once a week, and they have breakfast, lunch, or dinner meetings. And at each meeting, each person has a chance to talk. People who are so terrified of public speaking they could not lead silent prayer in a phone booth, after 10 or 15 weeks in Toastmasters are capable of standing up with 1 minute's notice and giving an extemporaneous talk in front of an audience of strangers. Toastmasters works. Why? It's because every single time a person stands up, They get positive feedback, they get correction, they get advice, they get applause, they get support. Eventually, what you do is you build up a whole series of positive reports in your subconscious mind that says, when it comes to public speaking, it's easy. If you want to be effective at selling, if you want to be effective at leading, if you want to be effective as a parent, if you want to be effective with other human beings, all you have to do is practice over and over again, and practice in your mind over and over until eventually you will find that when you think about whatever it is, the fear level will go down, confidence level will go up. By the way, one other area that you can go to if you want to learn to be more capable speaking is Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie has a wonderful course, which is just called the Dale Carnegie course, which really helps people become proficient in public speaking. Over 10 to 14 weeks, you get an opportunity every single week to get up and speak in front of your peers. The next is affirmations. Now, with affirmations, your potential is unlimited. Affirmations are the most powerful words that you can possibly say. Affirmations are based on what we would call the 3 Ps. In that with affirmations, we reprogram ourselves unconsciously. Affirmations are strong, positive, assertive statements that you say about yourself, to yourself, and believe. And they're based on the 3 Ps. And the Ps are, first of all, personal. All affirmations, all statements that you say to yourself have to be couched in the personal tense, the I. If you say, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself. When you say, I like myself, it accesses the subconscious directly. Every single command that begins with an I opens the subconscious mind and says, valuable information coming down. Prepare or get ready. And also, positive. All affirmative statements must be couched in the positive tense, because the subconscious mind filters out negatives and only takes the words that the positive expression. For example, if you wanted to quit smoking, you wouldn't say, I don't smoke anymore, I don't smoke anymore. You would say, I am a non-smoker. I am a non-smoker. The words I am are 2 of the most powerful words in mental programming. When you say I am, because only you can say I am about you. In the whole world, nobody else can use those 2 words with regard to you. And your subconscious recognizes that. When you say I am responsible, I am responsible, you can actually feel the impact of these words on your unconscious mind. You can feel the words I am responsible and feel their effect on your emotions. Now, the third is that they must be in the present tense. Not I will lose weight, or I will quit smoking, or I will get a better job, but I have a better job. I weigh X number of pounds. I earn X number of dollars. I earn X number of dollars. Whatever it happens to be, you always place it in the present tense, because the subconscious mind can only take language that is couched in the now. This is very, very important, that when we are reprogramming the subconscious mind, when you visualize, it's in the now. When you affirm, it's in the now. When you think about yourself as you would like to be, it is always in the now. The subconscious mind is, by the way, it's very literal. So when you create affirmations, and you can recreate affirmations for every goal that you can imagine. I earn X number of dollars. I weigh X number of pounds. I am a kind, loving human being. I am disciplined and industrious and fastidious. I am a good driver. I am punctual. I like myself. I am responsible. I feel great. I feel happy. I have health. I have energy. Interesting affirmation. If you repeat the affirmation over and over again, I have health. I have energy. I have health. I have energy. You can actually build up your body's resistance to things like colds and flus. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but very often we get sick because we decide to get sick, or we get sick because we let our minds and bodies coast, and we can actually drive a cold out of our systems by repeating the affirmation over and over again. I have health. I am healthy. I am strong. I feel great. I feel wonderful. So couch your affirmations and your visualizations. When you close your eyes, see yourself as though you had the characteristic or quality right now. Speak in terms of having the characteristic or quality right now. And as we said before with regard to emotion, imagine the feeling that would accompany the mental picture. Imagine the feeling that would accompany the words. When you say, I like myself, you don't say, I like myself. You say, I like myself. I like myself. I like myself. Imagine when you say, I am responsible, you don't say, I am responsible. You say, I am responsible. I am responsible. In other words, emotionalize it. Wrap it up with emotion. Drive it into the subconscious mind like a detonator. And the effect that it will have on your personality and on your feelings will be tremendous. Now, again, with regard to affirmations, what I use is a series of index cards. And you can put your affirmations, your positive, present tense, personal statements on affirmations, and review those affirmations over and over again. Every time you review them, every time you think about them, every time you repeat them and drive them into the subconscious mind, every time you impress them, you increase the potential for them to be expressed externally. Now, one final thing is when you use affirmations, try to keep your daily words and actions consistent with your affirmations. Try to keep the things that you say when you're walking around and the things that you do consistent with the words that you say to yourself in private. All right, the next thing that we do is what is called verbalization. Verbalization is speaking aloud, speaking your affirmations aloud. Now, there's two ways that you can do this. Best to do it in private, but basically you increase the impact of an affirmation by as much as 80% and even more when you say it out loud. If you say to yourself, I like myself, but if you say, I like myself, or I feel terrific, or I feel wonderful, or I am responsible, I earn $50,000 a year. When I first learned about this process, my goal was to earn $50,000 a year, and I realized that the only way I could ever earn $50,000 a year was by repeating this over and over again. And surprisingly enough, when I began doing it, I was not making anywhere near $50,000, and I was very, very skeptical of whether or not it would work. I can only tell you from the bottom of my heart that it does work. So verbalize it. Another thing that you can do is in front of a mirror. If you verbalize in front of a mirror, you have two impacts working simultaneously. You have the impact of what you can see, plus what you are saying, plus if you emotionalize what you are saying, you have three access points to reprogramming the subconscious working simultaneously. So you stand in front of a mirror, you can say, in front of the mirror, you can say, I feel terrific, or I look great, or I look great, or you can say, you look great. Because when we talk to ourselves in front of a mirror, now you mustn't do this in a public washroom when there's other people around, because they may think you're a little bit strange, but nonetheless, verbalization is a very important part of driving this message into the subconscious. Remember, the key to this is whatever you can hold in your mind on a continuing basis, you can have. The only question is, can you repeat it long enough and hard enough, often enough, to impress it permanently in the subconscious mind? Once you impress it permanently in the subconscious mind, it takes on a power of its own that will eventually bring it into your reality at exactly the right time and in exactly the right way for you. And this brings us to the next method, which is the method of assume the role. Assume the role. Assume the part. You see, one of the most important discoveries that we have made in behavioral psychology is this, is that if you feel a particular way, if you have particular emotions, the feelings will lead to actions. We've talked about this before, that we act in a way consistent with our feelings. However, what we've found is that most of us do not start off feeling motivated. Most of us do not start off feeling positive. Most of us do not start off feeling confident and capable of accomplishing our goals. Most of us start off feeling average to negative. However, if you will act exactly as if you had the feeling, the action will generate the emotion just as the emotion generates the feeling. In other words, you can act your way into feeling. This is very important. You can act your way into feeling. Have you ever had the occasion where you are sitting comfortably, relaxed, and somebody says, come on, let's go and do this, or let's get up and do that, and you say, no, I'm comfortable. Remember, you're into your comfort zone. Comfort is a great killer of human potential. You say, no. They say, oh, come on, just get up and do a little bit. So you get up just a little bit, and you move just a little bit, and as you begin to move, you start to get into the swing of it, and pretty soon you get into it completely, and you totally forget about going back to the couch or the chair that you were in. Well, you can act your way into feeling. You can act your way into feeling almost anything. We call this, if you like, pretending. Pretend that you have the quality already. For instance, if you want to be courageous and unafraid, pretend that you're courageous and unafraid already. If you want to be confident, pretend that you have the confidence. There's an old saying that says, fake it until you make it. Fake it until you make it. Remember we talked about the gentleman who was told that he was the reincarnation of Napoleon? That all he had to do was he had to act like Napoleon and realize that he had this cultural history behind him, that he had the decisiveness, the power, the courage, the genius, the brilliance, the tenacity, the foresight of one of the world's great leaders. Well, this acting, this pretending, this assuming the role is a critical part of actually becoming that person. If you want to be the finest salesperson in your organization, if you want to be a superb executive, if you want to be a tremendous technician, if you want to be an excellent medical professional, if you want to be the best mother or the best father, if you want to be excellent in athletics, there's an entire body of work today in neurolinguistic programming and what is called the inner game of winning that says that if you want to be a better tennis player, for instance, what you do is you imagine that you were a championship tennis player. Imagine that you are Arthur Ashe or Jimmy Connors or Chris Everett Lloyd or Maria whatever her name is, or one of the great tennis players, and play tennis exactly as if you were one of those. Play tennis as though you were them and in their body and on the court. And you know what will happen is that judges and people observing a person doing this find that you will hit more accurately, you hit with more force, you are better, you are more confident, you're more capable. Golfers. Another example is if you want to be a great golfer, is imagine that you are already a great golfer. If you want to be a great salesperson, imagine that you are already a great salesperson and walk, talk, carry, act as though you had the part already. Dress the part. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, do I look the part of a great golfer? Do I look the part of the executive, the salesman, or the saleswoman, or whatever it happens to be that I would like to be? These four, we call this the VAVA. V-A-V-A. V-A-V-A. Well, actually, I should do it this way. V-A-V-A. These are the keys to rapid personality change. The V is for visualization. Visualize and play the picture of the desired person you would like to be over and over again until it is accepted by the subconscious as a reality. Remember, the subconscious obeys your conscious commands. If you command the subconscious, and you command the subconscious by the thoughts you hold in your conscious mind, by the thoughts that you dwell upon, the law of concentration. If you hold that thought in your mind on a continuing basis, eventually it clicks into the subconscious and it takes on a power of its own. The second is to affirm, and affirm over and over again. There are many people who say that they would rather go without breakfast than go without their affirmations each morning. Speak to yourself positively. Use positive self-talk all the time. Remember, you talk to yourself at the rate of almost 1,500 words a minute. Most people talk to themselves in terms of doubt and fear and worry and anxiety. Talk to yourself positively. I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. Just repeating, I can do it, over and over again. Boost your self-confidence and boost your self-esteem. When you have nothing else to do, say, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself. Because saying I like myself or I love myself expands your ability and your capacity in every area of your life. Also, verbalize. Speak out loud. Make sure the things that you say out loud are consistent with the person that you want to be and the things that you want to do. Verbalize and say, I like myself. Don't say aloud things that, like, I'm never on time, I can't lose weight, I can't quit smoking, I wish I could, and so on. But always speak in positive terms. Remember that you can almost double the force of an affirmation by speaking it aloud. And if you speak it really loud, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself, you speak it really loud and really strong, it has double, triple, sometimes several times the impact. And finally, assume the role. Pretend as though you already had the part. Assume the role. Imagine that you have been hired to play the role of an extremely successful person in a Broadway play. And in this role, what you are going to do is you're going to walk, talk, and act as though you were the success, as though you were the role model, as though you were the ideal image of the perfect person that you want to become. And if you walk it, talk it, pretend it, visualize it, think it, and affirm it over and over again, that is the person that you become as inevitably as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. And in the next session, I'll tell you more about how to incorporate these personality attributes into your character.
Session 11, the new mental diet.
Back in the 1930s, a man named Gaylord Hauser shocked the medical world by coming out with a series of claims and statements that said that everything that we ate in some way affected our body. He said that everything that you eat is translated into something and has a positive or negative effect. And he wrote a book called The New Diet Does It. Now, in this session and in the previous sessions, we've been talking about the new mental diet. And just as everything that you eat has an effect on your physical body, everything that you take into your mind has an effect on your mental body, on what's going on inside you, which determines what happens around you. When we were talking a little bit earlier, we said that the power of suggestion is one of the most important powers in your life. The power of suggestion says that everything that you take in, everything that you think about, everything that you read, everything that you listen to, all of your conversations, radio, television, newspaper, books, papers, magazines, everything that you allow to influence your thinking affects your subconscious mind, affects your attitudes, your expectations, your values, your beliefs, and ultimately your potential as a human being. In fact, the great difference between human beings is not intelligence and not education and not opportunity. It is what they are feeding into their minds on a regular basis. Now, we also said, and it's the same thing, if you were to say, well, yes, I eat good food a lot of the time, but some of the time, or 50% of the time, I eat junk food. I eat food that's high in salt, high in sugar, low in nutrition, inert foods, dead foods, white flour, French fries, grease, and so on. But it doesn't bother me, it doesn't have any effect on my body, you would know that that is nonsense because everything counts. Everything counts. One of the marks of a truly honest person is that they accept reality. And reality is that everything that you do, mentally or physically, counts. And it's either positive, it's either helping you, moving you toward what you want to be and have and do, or it's negative, it's moving you away, but nothing is neutral. Everything counts. So with regard to the power of suggestion, let's go on and talk about how we complete this process of reprogramming ourselves so that inside we are totally successful human beings, so that outside we will be totally positive, enthusiastic, successful human beings. Feed your mind the same way you would feed your body. Feed your mind carefully. If you were concerned about physical health and longevity, you would measure and calculate and look into the foods you eat. Look carefully into the mental foods that you eat too. Because these mental foods, by a process what we call the law of accumulation. Now, the law of accumulation is both a mental law as well as a physical law. And what it says is that every single thing that you do, positive or negative, accumulates. That every single great achievement in life is the result of thousands of ordinary achievements, struggles, fallbacks, failures, minor disappointments. Every single big accomplishment is preceded by thousands of tiny little accomplishments. Every overnight success is preceded by years and years and years of working off-Broadway. Every single great fortune. By the way, in studying self-made millionaires in America, do you know what we found? Is the average time that it takes to become a millionaire in America is over 20 years of hard work. In other words, we see a person who is wealthy, got a beautiful home, beautiful car, financially independent, but we don't realize that there are years and years and years of hard work, struggle, and sacrifice that preceded it. We see the person, we see the end result, and we say, isn't that person lucky? Well, the fact of the matter is that there's no luck. There's just this long process of accumulation, and everything counts. Every single honest effort that you make toward becoming a better person accumulates like a snowball and has an effect. Every single time you do something that takes you away, that wastes your time, wastes your mind, wastes your thought, and so on, that has an effect too, and that accumulates. Now, the great mistake that many people make is they go a little bit forward and a little bit backward. They do a few things that are good for their mind and a few things that are crummy for their mind, and a few things that are good and a few things that are crummy. And you know where they end up? Exactly where they started. The good offsets the bad. What you have to do is you have to put yourself on the side of the angels so that your predominant intakes of mental food are positive and constructive and moving you in the direction that you want to go in. So, we say feed your mind. Number one is read. Only reading is reading. Many people today don't like to read, but all leaders are readers. All leaders are readers. Read, and try to read an average of 1 hour per day. We know that if you read 1 hour per day, over the course of the day, in something that builds your mind, something positive and constructive that builds your mind, not newspapers, not wasted things that just preoccupy your mind, but something that builds you and develops you. 1 hour per day can change your life. Research shows that 1 hour per day, in 2 to 3 years, you will be an authority on your subject, on studying any subject, from time management to nuclear physics. 1 hour per day will make you an authority. 3 to 5 years will make you an expert, and 5 to 7 years will make you an international authority, make you one of the most knowledgeable people in that field in the world, in just 1 hour a day in any subject. And you can pick anything from medicine to molecular biology. So read an hour per day. Recent study shows that the average adult in North America reads less than 1 book a year. That 58% of adults in the United States and Canada never finish a non-fiction book after they leave high school. When they leave high school, you know what they say? Or they leave university, they say, "Thank heavens this is over. I'll never read another book as long as I live." And they can't understand why they stop growing. It is only reading that causes your mind to stretch and grow. Conversation is good. Listening is good. Courses and classes are good. Watching videotape instruction is good, of course. But only reading is reading, and there's no substitute. People say, "Well, I'm not a good reader. I didn't learn to read well in school." Good. Then set that as one of your goals, to become an excellent reader. In 1 year of remedial reading at an evening course, you can be reading 300, 400, 500 words a minute, and it will change your life. In fact, according to the Gallup organization's poll on who's who in America, the Great American Success Story, they found that the top people, the top 1% in this country, read an average of 12 non-fiction books per year. That means that you can join the top 1% in the nation by simply reading 1 book per month. 1 non-fiction book that develops your mind and expands your ability to think in a subject that interests you. 1 book a month will put you in the top 1% in a very short period of time. If you were to read 30 to 60 minutes each day, as I'll recommend later, 30 to 60 minutes each day would translate into a book per week. A book per week would translate into over 50 books a year. Now just imagine if you were to read 50 books a year for the next 10 years. How many books would that be? That would be about 500 books, if you can work it out. Now let me ask you a very simple question. Do you think that if you read 1 book a week for the next 10 years, in a world where the average person reads less than 1 book a year, do you think that would give you the edge? Do you think that would affect your life in any way? Do you think that would change your career and your income? Do you think it would change your environment? Do you think it would change everything that goes on around you? You bet your bippy it would, because by the power of suggestion, by feeding your mind with new information, 500 books in 10 years will transform your life in such a way that you will never be able to recognize it. Right, the next thing with regard to feeding your mind is listen to tapes. The discovery of audio cassette learning has been considered the greatest single advance in education since the discovery of the printing press, or the invention of the printing press. Audio cassette learning brings the finest minds in the world with their finest thoughts, thought out, scripted, edited, tightly compressed and put together into your hands for a few dollars a tape, and you can walk, travel, jog with some of the greatest minds alive for only a few dollars. Listen to tapes in your car. Do you know the average person who drives spends 500 to 1,000 hours a year in their car? 500 to 1,000 hours a year. The majority of those people sit there and listen to the radio. As we call radio, with all due respect to people in the radio industry, it's called chewing gum for the ears. Because it just goes on and on. 500 to 1,000 hours is the equivalent of 12 and a half to 25 40-hour weeks. Do you know what that means? It means that you are getting the benefit of, or could be getting the benefit of, as much as 12 and a half to 25 40-hour work weeks. Imagine if your company would send you away for 25 weeks to study every single year at no extra charge. Do you think that would affect your career and your earning capacity? That's the equivalent of 1 to 2 university semesters. Imagine if you were taking the equivalent of 1 or 2 university semesters of additional education every single year. Do you think that would affect your life? Yes, it would. So, listen to tapes and finally take additional courses. Become a lifelong student. And when I say take additional courses, the very best place to take courses is from people who are experts in their field. Try to avoid taking courses from people who've only got their education out of a textbook. Take courses from people who are experts. Take seminars. Seminars, for instance, like this seminar that you're attending, you can get more information in a 1 or 2 day seminar taught by people who spent 10, 20, 30 years gathering and compressing the information than you can in an entire university course. So take additional courses. I recommend a minimum of 4 per annum. 1 every 3 months. In a world where the average person never takes an additional course, 80 to 90% of people never take a course after they leave high school or university. If you take 4 per year, listen to tapes in your car and read on a regular basis. And by the way, where do you get the time for reading? Just don't read so much newspaper. Simple as that. Just cut back on the newspaper a little bit and expand the amount of self-development reading that you do. Where do you get time to listen to tapes? Just don't listen to so much radio. I'm not saying don't listen to the radio at all, but just don't listen to so much of it. Where do you get time to take additional courses? Instead of sitting around on the weekends, take a course. Instead of watching television in the evenings, go and take a course. But remember, the clock is running. If you want to get to the top of your field, if you want to be a leader, if you want to be a star in your field, knowledge is power. Knowledge today is more important than anything else. Knowledge is the great power in our society, and the more knowledge you have, the more practical knowledge that can be put to purposes that can help other people and benefit yourself and the people around you, the more knowledge you have, the more power you will have, the more self-esteem you will have, the more status, the more position, the more security, everything. The most insecure person in our society is the person who has stopped learning and growing, and they know it. All right. By the way, one other thing. According to the Harvard studies, one of the keys to self-motivation is perpetual growth. As long as you're growing and learning and feeding your mind with new material, you will be continuously motivated exactly as if you were taking psychological vitamins. As soon as you stop growing, you start stagnating. When you start stagnating, your self-esteem goes down, your energy level goes down, your health level goes down, you become prone to more diseases, and so on and so forth. So as long as you're learning and growing, you'll be vital physically and mentally. The next part of feeding your mind is what we call the reference group. Or put it another way, get around the right people. Get around the right people. Now, getting around the right people simply means this, is that when we talked about the power of suggestion, we said that about 85 to 95% of all of the influences in your life, all the reasons you do anything, is because of suggestive influences around you. Not only physical suggestions, the weather, the heat, the cold, and so on, but also the emotional suggestions, the impact of the people you associate with. And the more you associate with people, especially people in your family, people in your close social circle, people that you work with, the more you associate with these people, the more of an impact they have on your thinking and on your future. David McClelland found at Harvard University, after 25 years, he found that the choice of a reference group was one of the key determinants of success or failure in life. Now, a reference group are the people that you identify with. Remember we talked about identification? The people that you consider yourself to be one of. It's as simple as that. Who do you identify with? Well, let me give you an example. I was reading the story of a self-made millionaire not long ago, and he had started off as a young man when other kids were collecting baseball cards or football cards or hockey cards. He became fascinated with executives of Fortune 500 corporations. So he began reading his father's Business Week, Newsweek, Fortune magazine, Wall Street Journal, and he began keeping files on executives who were in the news. And he began to identify with those executives. He began to think about being in a Fortune 500 corporation, and he began to think about being an executive in a Fortune 500 corporation at a time when some people were thinking about being hockey stars or baseball stars. The interesting thing was that as he grew up, this directional mechanism, this role model, this reference group that he identified with began to affect what he read in school, what he studied, how much he applied himself, how hard he worked, what companies he went to work with, what company he went to work with when he came out of high school and university. And by the time he was 25 years old, he was an executive of a Fortune 500 corporation, one of the youngest executives of a Fortune 500 corporation in business history, but it's because he started at the age of 12 identifying with those. Question, who do you identify with? Now, whoever you identify with today, one of the things you have to ask yourself is, who would you like to be like? Who do you want to identify with? And then you start getting around the right people. The starting point of getting around the right people is to start to read the magazines that they read. If you want to be a successful person in business, read successful business magazines. If you want to be a top salesperson, read successful sales magazines, marketing magazines, books written by top salespeople. If you want to be a successful executive, if you want to be a successful marketer, if you want to be a successful parent, then begin getting around these people through their writings, through their tapes, and through their courses. The other thing is to seek them out and begin to associate with winners. As we say, fly with eagles. Now let me make one point here that's absolutely critical. It is simply this, is that if you scratch with the turkeys, you can't fly with the eagles. That if you spend time with losers, you will be a loser yourself. That David McClelland of Harvard found that 99% of the failure rate in life could be attributed to associating with people who were going nowhere. Because we're so strongly influenced by the people around us. We talk like them, we walk like them, we take on their attitudes, their values, their beliefs, their expectations, even their self-concepts. If we associate with negative people, critical people, cynical people, lazy people, people who waste their time, we will become exactly like them. Every one of us has the tendency to be like a chameleon. We take on the colorings and the behaviors of the people around us. So it's very important that you make a decision what you want to be like, and you begin to associate with people who are like that. And especially get away from the losers. Get away from the no-hopers. Get away from the negative people, because these people will drag you down as surely as an anchor would drag you down if it was tied to your leg. Many people come to me and say, well, I'm working for a negative boss, or I'm in a negative relationship. And I say this, if you're working for a negative boss, you'll never realize your potential working for that boss. You'll never be happy, and you'll never accomplish everything you're capable of accomplishing. They say, well, if I'm in a negative relationship, what do I do? I say, you have to ask yourself this question. Do you want to fulfill your potential as a human being or not? If you want to fulfill your potential as a human being, here's the facts. I'm not making the facts up. I'm just telling you, here's the facts. But if you associate with losers, you'll be a loser. And it's been worked out for 25 years, and they can't find any exceptions to it. And I've spoken to thousands of people who've told me that coming to terms with this is one of the hardest things that they ever did. Because sometimes it means that you have to say goodbye to family, say goodbye to friends, say goodbye to relatives, say goodbye to relationships. But if that is the fact, the sooner you do it, the better. It's almost like taking out a rotten tooth. The sooner you do it, the less pain you suffer. Now, with the next part with regard to reference group is this. It's what is called the Mastermind Alliance. And that is to pick one or two or more people in your environment whom you admire, who are positive, who are going places, who are ambitious, and start to get together with them at least once per week for breakfast or lunch just to talk. Get around them. Something about the fertilization and the synergy of positive minds coming together, talking about your problems, talking about your challenges, talking about the future, talking about what's going on. Try to get together with a mastermind alliance once a week. We have found in the research that I've done, the research that Napoleon Hill has done, that associating with other positive people is one of the triggering influences to peak performance. It's one of the guarantors that you will become a great success. You can't do it by simply associating by yourself. All right, now another way to influence your mind, very, very important, is start each day right. Start each day right. Now this is based on the fact that there are 2 times of the day when you are most suggestive, when your subconscious mind is most open to new information. And that is nighttime before you go to sleep, just when you fall off to sleep, and morning. These are the 2 times when your conscious mind is most relaxed and your subconscious mind is most alert. So you must use these times as what we call key programming opportunities to put new information into your mind. And this is what I suggest you do, and it's very, very powerful. Before you go to sleep at night, feed your mind with a stream of messages consistent with what you want to be and have and do the next day. In other words, program yourself for the next day, the same way you'd program a computer. And what I do is I lie down and I close my eyes and I say, I wake up in the morning, present tense, and I feel terrific. I wake up in the morning and I feel terrific. I wake up in the morning, I feel wonderful. I feel full of energy. I believe tomorrow is going to be a great day. I wake up in the morning and I feel terrific. And then when you get up in the morning, the first thing that you say, the first thought that you program into your subconscious computer is, I feel terrific. 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 What you do is you get up and you say it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and you repeat it over. I feel terrific. I feel terrific. You don't get up in the morning and say, geez, I'm tired. Geez, I'm tired. Geez, I'm tired. Oh, God, I'm tired. You get up in the morning and say, I feel terrific. Somebody says, how you feeling? You say, I feel terrific. Even when you feel terrible, say, I feel terrific. You see, your subconscious mind can't tell the difference between a real fact and one that you vividly imagine. And if you repeat, I feel terrific, very loud, I feel terrific, try it yourself. I feel terrific, I feel terrific, I feel terrific. What happens is the subconscious mind believes that maybe you do feel terrific, and it will actually give you a surge of energy that will wake you up and clear your mind even before you have coffee. Now, the second thing that you do in the morning, this is number one. Second thing that you do to start your day off well is to read for 30 to 60 minutes. Get up early enough to read for 30 to 60 minutes in something that is motivational, something that is inspirational, something that is educational, something that uplifts your mind, what we call mental protein. Not newspapers, not magazine, not television, not radio. Get up in the morning, sit down, and read something really good for yourself. Read something that makes you feel really good about yourself and your day. I read spiritually oriented material every single morning. And this is called, by the way, the golden hour. If you will do this as a result of attending this seminar, if you will begin to read every morning for 30 to 60 minutes in something that uplifts your mind, this alone will be worth all the time you spend in this seminar. This habit of using the golden hour, the first hour in the morning when your mind is wide open to new information, using it constructively, is one of the most powerful success techniques I've ever found in my entire life. I've had hundreds of people come back to me and say this has changed their life. Just getting up a little bit early so you can sit and read quietly. You will become so addicted to using that golden hour that you will not be able to do without it. Even if you have to get up tired, even if you have to get up long before you have to go to work, get up and milk that golden hour. Fill your mind full of rich mental protein, beautiful thoughts and ideas. Uplift your mind and you'll find that your whole day will go better. And the third step is review your goals every morning. Review your goals every morning. Every morning before you start out, review your goals. Just the same as if you were on a long motor trip, or if you were at sea, you'd look at the map. You'd shoot the stars and the moon. In other words, you'd take a look at where you are and you would plot your destination and you would think about it, because when you review your goals, you program them into your subconscious mind. Well, programming them into your subconscious mind by repeating them every day and using that wonderful technique, that golden hour. I learned this many years ago, and I've been absolutely astonished. Those 3 points: wake up in the morning and say, I feel terrific. Read for 30 to 60 minutes and write and review your goals every single morning. And the most remarkable thing that happens is you start off every day supercharged. You start off every day feeling positive. You start off every day feeling energetic. So let's just review for a second, and I'm going to wrap up with 2 really critical points. We talked about the power of suggestion. Remember that everything counts. Everything that you read, everything that you listen to, everything that you watch on television, every magazine that you pick up, every conversation that you have, positive or negative, is affecting your subconscious mind, which is programming your future. Remember, your external world is a reflection of your internal world. Your external world is a reflection of your internal world. If there is negativity, concern, anxiety, fear in your internal world, then it's going to be reflected in your external world. So be sure that what you're taking into your mental diet is just as pure as what you would take into a physical diet if you wanted to sustain high levels of physical health and energy. Absolutely important. Feed your mind with books. Feed your mind with tapes. Feed your mind with positive conversations. Feed your mind with courses. Go and attend them. Listen to experts. Feed your mind with positive people. If one of the recommendations that one of the business philosophers says is poor people should take rich people out to lunch. Why? Because taking a rich person out to lunch is an opportunity to learn from that rich person, to get information from that person that you could not buy at any price. Poor people should take rich people out to lunch. Get around the winners. Think about the winner that you want to be and look around you in your world and say, who is like the person that I want to be? Here's another very important point in terms of mental programming. It's simply this, is discard past labels. Discard past labels. Don't ever allow anybody to tag you with the way that you used to be. If you were late before, don't allow anybody to say, well, you're always late. You say no. You say, in the past, I was late, but now I am punctual. You can't control your eating. In the past, I overate, but now I eat sensibly and soundly. You're irritable and impatient. No, in the past I was, but now I am. These are the words. In the past I was. Past tense. In the past I was. Remember, the subconscious is listening, but now I am. But now I am blank, 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 whatever it happens to be. In the past, I didn't work very effectively, but now I am an effective worker. In the past, I didn't manage my time well, but now I manage my time well. Now, if you make a mistake and you fall back, then what you do is you just simply cancel the mistake by saying, well, next time, I'll. You show up late for an appointment, you say, well, next time, I'll be on time, etc. Next time, I'll. Those are the words. You cancel every mistake. You refuse to carry past labels forward. Underlining all this, teach others. Teach what you know to people who are interested. Teach what you know to people who are interested. Because remember, you become what you teach. You will find that the more you teach other people and share this information with other people, the more you internalize it yourself. You become what you teach. Does this material work? I can tell you, yes, it does work. Since I began to teach this material, since I began to lecture on it and tape on it, since I began to speak to hundreds and thousands of people, I have internalized all the things that we talk about in this course. And everything that I talk about here when I first began teaching, I hoped it worked, I thought it worked, I sort of believed it worked, but now I know it works. Having taught it, I've internalized it. Having internalized it, I have seen examples of every single bit of this. Back everything that you do with confident expectations. An attitude of confident expectations is the mark of the truly healthy personality. Remember we talked about the power of expectations? An attitude of confident expectations means that you confidently expect good things to happen. You have an attitude of positive self-expectancy. You become what W. Clement Stone calls an inverse paranoid. An inverse paranoid, as you know, a paranoid is a person who is convinced that the world is out to get him, that the whole world is conspiring to get him. An inverse paranoid is a person who is convinced that the world is conspiring to do him or her good. So become an inverse paranoid. Be absolutely convinced that the world has got a plot out there. It's plotting to do you good. It's plotting to somehow get good to you, whether you like it or not. That no matter what happens, look into it for the good. No matter what happens, this is the key to becoming an inverse paranoid. Look for the good. Expect the best and look for the good. Expect the best and look for the good. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that the measure of a healthy personality is your ability to look for the good in everything around you, your propensity to look for the good. You have to ask yourself, how much of the time do you look for the good? How much of the time do you expect the bad? The degree to which you look for the good is the degree to which you are healthy as a human being. And finally, remember this. The process of changing from where you are now, here's where you are, to here's your goal. This is where you want to go. The process of getting from here to here is progressive, but this is what happens. When you begin to visualize and affirm and imagine and write and plan your new self, that is, say you want to earn $50,000 a year, and you're currently earning $25,000 a year, and your goal is to earn $50,000 a year, what happens is this. You keep saying, you start to affirm and visualize over and over again, I earn $50,000 a year, I earn $50,000 a year, I earn $50,000 a year. Your subconscious mind disbelieves it. But as you say it over and over again, your subconscious mind still disbelieves it. But as you repeat it, I earn $50,000 a year, I earn $50,000 a year, I earn $50,000 a year, the disbelief shrinks, and your disbelief gets smaller and smaller. Eventually, you actually overcome your own skepticism, and finally you reach the position where you neither believe nor disbelieve. But as you keep repeating it and thinking about it and reading it and studying it and saying over and over again, I earn $50,000 a year, I earn $50,000 a year, I earn $50,000 a year, eventually you start to believe it just a little bit. Also, you start to get a slight increase in pay, and your salary goes to $26,000 a year. And then you get a bonus and you find yourself earning $27,000, and so on. You find that the more you repeat it and affirm it and visualize it and plan for it and prepare for it, the more it comes into your life, and you just keep saying, I earn $50,000 a year, and you begin to believe it more and more, and you believe it more and more. And as you repeat it and visualize it and affirm it and over again, your belief grows and grows and grows, and eventually it gets to the point where you absolutely believe that you earn $50,000 a year. And if somebody were to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and give you a shake and say, how much do you earn? You say $50,000 a year, even though still at this point you've never earned more than 27,000 in your whole life. Now, this is the way all our beliefs change. We start off with where we are now. We look at where we want to be in the future, and we begin to feed our mind with new mental food consistent with where we want to be. As we feed our mind with that new mental food, we start off with a lot of disbelief and skepticism. As a matter of fact, your skepticism and disbelief is the biggest obstacle to your success. But as we repeat it over and over again, as we continue to work on ourselves and to work on the situation, we begin to believe more and more that it's possible. We begin to impress the possibility of it deeper and deeper into the subconscious. Now, in propaganda, this is called the big lie. The big lie theory was the discovery that if you repeated anything over and over again often enough, that even the most intelligent person would come to believe it. With regard to your life and to my life, this is called the big truth. The big truth is that you can be, have, and do anything that you want if you want it badly enough and are willing to make the efforts. That anything that you can hold in your mind on a continuing basis, you can be, have, or do. You will become what you think about. Your only job is to make a very, very clear decision about the person you want to be, the things that you want to have, the goals that you want to accomplish, and then make sure that you feed your mind continuously, day by day, week by week, hour by hour, with words, pictures, images, ideas, thoughts, and information consistent with your goals and your ideals. Keep your mind on what you want, keep it off of what you don't want, and everything is possible for you.